And now we are with our next speaker, Professor Esra Hatipoglu, which will be talking about
social responsibilities of universities or higher education. Okay. I'll try to be as short as possible so that I can take more, questions. So once again, I'm very happy to be here. It's an honor for me just to present this paper to you. I will just start my presentation even questioning the word future, right? Even we cannot really define the time span. What do we mean by future? So the future of universities, while we are talking about the future of universities, okay, because future is coming, even 5 minutes later or 1 minute later, the future is there. So while we are talking about all these developments in education in various sectors, we're always talking about the world first. I mean, change is always there, innovation, speed of innovation, speed of technology. We are always saying that, okay, we are living in a VUCA world, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. So all these things are really make us as human beings a little bit anxious about our future. So what we will do, and most of our students really think that, and these are also written in various articles, etc., and we are also telling them this, that they will not really work in occupations related to their education. So this is really a vicious circle. And while we are talking about new type of educations, digital education, education 4.0, we even don't know the main, or we even don't have any common labeling of new education types, but we know that something is changing, right? And education is so much related with this, and now we are talking about 100-year life. We are talking about lifelong education. So it means that learning really becoming more important and more interesting thing to be discussed. So since we are in education sector, we are talking about changes in education sector, but in general, every sector is trying to prepare itself for the future. I mean, what do we mean by future? We can just define. So then we are talking about new skills, new ideas, new knowledge to keep pace, because technology is advancing and we are just trying to catch it. And we are talking about artificial intelligence, we are talking about smart everything. So we are just somehow degrading the human beings, right? It means that education should help all of us to come to a certain point. And while we are talking about the new changes in game of education, we are talking about the changes in content. We are talking about the change in the process and the tools. So everything is changing and we have to deal with them. And on the other hand, we're talking about digital education, education 4.0. We are talking about education at any time, at any place. We are talking about personalized learning, right? I mean, study tools adapt to the personal characteristics of all the students. We are talking about free choice, so individualization is becoming more and more important. But when we come to social responsibility, then we try to make them act as societal personality. So this is very interesting trick. So field experience becoming much more important. Project-based education is becoming much more important. We also try to change the exams, and students are much more becoming owner of their institutions, universities than anybody else. So they are just entering into the curriculum formulation, etc. And we are talking about mentoring as well, mentor-mentee relationship, and we are talking about independence learning. And before coming to the social responsibility, I think the most important thing now the universities has a social responsibility just to prepare all the students to the future, right? I mean, this is the basic social responsibility because they need skills. As I said in my introduction speech, they need skills, but on the other hand, they have to be prepared mentally for the future, just to deal with everything around. That's why I was talking about critical thinking, emotional intelligence, communication, empathy, which we all together can be called them as soft skills. So it means that from the very beginning, universities from then on have this social responsibility to prepare mentally, physically, plus from skill point of view, all these students, staff, and the lecturers for the future. So this is #1 social responsibility project. But on the other hand, while we are talking about all these things, we also discuss different generations of universities. I mean, first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation. There are some, scholars who are talking about fifth generation universities as well. So, in the first generation, we talk about education mostly. In the second generation, we talk about, as you also mentioned in your introductory speech, scientific research. And then third generation is much more valorization. And fourth generation is much more utility centers of, universities as utility centers, both for the students, all the stakeholders. So this is very important, and this is, again, brought us to the point of social responsibility. So while we're talking about, or just go through the literature on social responsibilities of universities, it's not easy to find much Turkish, not any, but much Turkish literature on social responsibility of, in Turkish, in Turkish, on universities. It's rather a new concept, but a well-accepted concept because it really makes you feel good from one side as universities. But on the other hand, as we know, university should be excellent in education, excellent in research, excellent in teaching, excellent in learning, but at the same time should also contribute to society. Without just dismantling of all this knowledge to the society, it is not easy to come. You cannot just put some sort of a gap between universities and society anymore. So that's why, for example, most of the foundation universities are opened in places where can be developed, and where university may share its advantages with the people living around. So this is a strategy, and this is also social responsibility. So universities are really realize that they are important in education, they are important as research centers, they are important also as utility centers, starting from inner circle. But on the other hand, since it's a new concept and it was really regarded as something voluntary, so there is no law just enforcing, at least in Turkey, just to have any university to have some social responsibility projects. But that's why, every university has the right to decide at what point and, how many social responsibility projects they will do, and how they will do, what motivates them to have that kind of processes. So every university is individually involved in social responsibility projects in general. So now we're talking about, it was much more a charitable, voluntary activity. Now we started to talk about a much more comprehensive concept, including economic social and environmental problems. And the interesting thing, while we're talking about social responsibility project, there are some fashionable subjects that many universities taking incentives in having some social responsibility projects. So, as I said before, universities from one side trying to apply new educational methods, new educational tools, and just try to deal with each student one by one, and just try to monitoring them as individuals. But on the other hand, they also have to show them that they have to act as societal personalities. So this is another thing. In general, I mean, nowadays I can understand that many of our students can realize what they do, what they should do. Since I am mostly working on international relations, and I'm a profession in international relations, we are always saying that, okay, the more problem, I mean, the number of problems are increasing that apart us from nation point of view, national point of view. Different nations have various problems that make them apart from each other, but on the other hand, this is a vicious circle. The number of problems that we have to solve together is also increasing. So this is the same thing that happens here. So transfer of knowledge to society is very important, becoming important, and this is one of the most important roles of universities, because universities' roles are evolving as well. Now, if you just see all the Turkish universities, you can see that social responsibility became one of the most important strategic goals for all universities. And they publicly announce it in their websites that one of the most important strategic goal is social responsibility. And they know that this is important. They know that this is one of their duty to do it. And they know that if they do something like this, they can differentiate themselves from the other universities. But the most important thing, as I said in my introductory speech, to internalize all these activities. And what I see, I mean, there are lots of social responsibility projects on the same topic. I mean, coordination is still lacking a little bit. That's why maybe university has the advantage to bring all the stakeholders together to have social responsibility projects as well. I mean, it has this advantage as well. Now the universities definitely, I mean, should act, when we talk about social responsibility, should act both academic and operational level. And we know that most of the universities in Turkey inserted social responsibility as a lecture in their curriculum. So they try to create the awareness about all these things, and consciousness, try to increase the consciousness among the students, among the lecturers, among all stakeholders. But when it comes to the operational level, I mean, we still need some time to go ahead. We still need some more incentives to do it, to do more social responsibility projects. Now, again, corporate social responsibility is one of the most important concepts that are discussed within the university context. There are lots of companies who wants to do, together with the universities, wants to some social responsibility projects. So, I mean, this is an advantage at the end. So, fostering a learning community, creating an effective networks, creating a educational culture, dynamic learning community. So these are really important for just to create universities' distinctive character as well. And as I said, I mean, universities' role is changing. So they are no longer just institutions giving degrees or skills, but they really act together with the society. They have to promote their knowledge with the society as well. Now, most of the universities take economic responsibility, take philanthropic responsibility, environmental responsibility. They are much more involved in employees' wellness, health, just trainers of training, training of trainers are becoming more important because, if we're talking about that much of change, these change should be done or taught with, somehow by us. So now, while we're talking about all these universities, they try to create a difference to social and economic well-being of the communities around themselves, integrating social responsibility into their missions, visions, research and teaching missions. This is fine. I mean, you can see most of the universities in Turkey now having this social responsibility into their missions, visions, teaching missions, research, but finding this should really, all these responsibility projects somehow should have a target, right? I mean, just generally, if you are doing social responsibility projects, this may be voluntary, this may be something that you are just sharing your knowledge or experience, whatever it is, but the most important part is just to try to understand the effect by feedback, right? So just doing something is not really made you understand that you are doing something and it is important. So here, while we are talking about the universities, I think there is some difficulties in getting the feedbacks, whether they are useful or not. So, social responsibility is regarded something. So, something that should be done. But for the social responsibility, you have to decide from the very beginning. You have to get the topics that you have to take as a target. You have to have a project to deal with. So social responsibility is generally taken as spending money just to various areas. But if it is done in a much more appropriate way, like as a strategy, okay, it's a part of strategic goal, but it should be a plan in itself. So this is this, and then we will go to this part. There should be a community dealing with these issues, and this is the funding, because generally we have great ideas, but when it comes to the implementation, then we're trying to search for funds, right? Great ideas, social responsibility somehow related with great ideas, but without any funding, it's not easy to realize all these great ideas. So if you just start from a great idea, if you don't have any implementation plan, then you fail. And this is much more disappointment. So I think we are very enthusiastic people, and we are great entrepreneurs. But when it comes to the controlling and getting the results, we are a little bit having difficulty in getting all these things. So, from the very beginning, all the universities should really define the subject, and then should really define the implementation plan, and should really define the funding process, because otherwise, definitely it will fail. And plus the feedback process, how we will just measure the effect, because it's especially in social areas, it's not easy to somehow measure the impact of all these activities. So this is something very important, I think. How it is funded and executed is really an important process. As I said, in most of our universities, many universities really try to give some research topics to their students with impact, societal impact. They try to have graduates with social responsibility, because they are just trying to increase consciousness and at the same time awareness through some lectures. We have social responsibility lectures at many universities in their curriculum. As universities, we try to engage the communities. We created some seminars, conferences, some certificate programs. So we were just trying to engage communities. Most of the universities mostly deal with environmental responsibility. Now we have zero waste project. It is also, integrated into all the universities. So zero waste is an important social responsibility project. And most of the universities know that they cannot be sustainable without social responsibility, without socially responsible. So now they are aware of all the dynamics, all the necessity. They are all aware that they have to do these things without any pressure. But as I said, how to do it is a little bit still tricky issue. There are some very important examples that worked until now. One of them was Refreshment University. I don't know whether you heard about this. This is an interesting creation. It is some sort of an educational field at not only Nisantasi University, but there are some other universities as well, taking education after 60. So it's a lifelong education. So they're taking lectures like the universities, 4 years of education. So they are just trying to update themselves, second spring, it's called as. They are just trying to update themselves. At the same time, this is definitely voluntary, and all the lecturers are volunteer to give lectures, and definitely this is free of charge, even for the foundation universities. So that's why it's social responsibility project. So all these people over 60 also at the end become mentors of the students, young students. So they work together. So it's a part of digital learning. They also learn, this is also vice versa. They also learn, for example, using smartphones from them, or computer programs from them. So this is something that educate, that help to use knowledge in a different way. As I said, we have so many social responsibility projects concerning Syrians, positions, their education, their integration into the society. So most of the universities are involved in these issues. We have so many social responsibility projects concerning environmental awareness, green campuses, campuses for, barrier-free campuses. It's not only for disabled and for the people with special needs, but free barrier-free universities. This also includes mental being free. And there are some definitely social responsibility projects concerning human rights. This is a very important topic. Young people, interaction of young people with old ones, intercultural social responsibility projects are very popular now. So most of the universities try to create some intercultural educations, intercultural projects, and this is Hope for Education, for example, and just to try to integrate all these cultures together, to work together, because in a way we are living in a global community. We cannot just, even if we are in Africa, in Turkey, in United States, we have to communicate with each other, and communication is advancing, and everybody knows what is happening everywhere. So this is, we have to have more or less, at least, a common denominator of doing something. And education is a universal one, so we know what we are doing and what we have to do. So universities are changing their roles, definitely. And the problem is, universities need to change their roles, but the problem is how to change all the stakeholders' mind. So this is the most tricky ones, because, if something is becoming more fashionable, then everybody try to do it, right? Without understanding meaning, because they think that, okay, if they're be the first, then it will be good for them. So this is a much more just putting everything while you are going, right? Everything together. We have different sayings in this as well. So, the problem is mental transformation. The problem is commitment, right? So we are talking about social responsibility projects, but if it is for one time, then again, there's a problem. It should be sustainable. It should be well adapted. It should be well planned. It should be well funded. All these things coming together. If we are talking about smart things, so this is this. You cannot just do everything just for, not for fun, but for doing things at that time and just try to save the day. So this is the most important thing as far as I can see. It should be sustainable. It should be it can be implemented. So from the very beginning, it's seen that this idea can be implemented. So feasibility is one of the most important things related with social responsibility projects of the universities as well. So I think that from Turkish point of view, because I know most of the universities and administrators there, I know that as Turkish people, we can act so quickly, right? Try to adapt ourselves to the changing situation as fast as possible. But on the other hand, there are some important things that we have to do. As I said from the very beginning, mental transformation is the most difficult and most time-taking thing. So if we cannot change our minds, if we don't think, everything should be natural, right, at the end. You shouldn't be told by someone that you have to have social responsibility project. This should come from internally, naturally. So creativity is important, all these things. You cannot just, again, international relations specialist, you cannot just somehow bring democracy from another I mean, the same democracy from another country. So this is something interesting to be creative, because there were some questions about the new technology, the new tools of education. It should be adapted to all countries. It should be, somehow it should be adapted to the characteristics of each countries, because yes, there is no one real fact. We can just somehow evolve these tools just to adapt our countries. So just transferring one thing as it is in any country is not working. So we have to deal with the students. We have some cultural practices. We have some backgrounds. We have some educational backgrounds. We have some, many things I can just say here. So that's why, I mean, mental changes are important for all of us, which will take some time, but we should start from somewhere. I mean, we cannot just stop and wait for everything to happen. So we have to be inside, because the problem is now everything is developing. We are just redefining the concepts, which is very important. It means that we can involve in creating the new things. So it's it's a very nice period for us, because we are just creating the history now. Everybody is creating, but now, even from international relations point of view, all the concepts are redefining, and if you are on the spot, and if you are in the area, if you work hard, if you try to contribute, then you will not have any reason to complain afterwards. Because if you just wait and everything to happen and then to complain, is not working. If you are on the spot, if you are in the area and try to be involved in all these developments related with education, related with international relations, whatever it is, then there is no way to complain about this. Because this is constructivism, right? You just construct everything. Now we are just constructing our world, our future of universities, right? Our future. So we have to contribute to this. Maybe one, you can say that one person cannot change anything, but it can. I mean, he or she can. So that's why we have to be on spot. Things are not easy. We are quote-unquote smart people to understand that things are not that easy. We have to do something more and more, but we have to collaborate. We have to know each other more and more. We have to create common practices, and we have to know each other face to face. Yes, digitalization, smartphones, internet, everything, but face-to-face relations are still one of the most important elements for the human beings, right? I mean, this is to see our faces, to understand our feelings are more important than just talk over the phone or just writing emails, Skype or whatever it is, just to put machine in between. So face-to-face relations are still very important. That's why these kinds of gatherings are important for networking. At least we can understand what we are doing, what are the people's understanding of the world, where we are, I mean, how we position ourselves within the world system. So these are important things, and as I said, this is really important to have mental transformation, but even before mental transformation, the will and commitment is much more important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Esra.
Thank you.
We have questions for Professor Esra? I think Dr. Besa has something, also Dr. Anke. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think it's a very interesting point you mentioned, that almost everything is being redefined right now. And it just hit my mind that we may also in the university world think about how we define a student. If you ask any professor right now about a student, he would tell you it's from 18 to 22, unless they are doing a graduate school, they are probably in their late 20s. That 50 years ago was acceptable, that this is the definition of a student, because that was in the middle of their life expectancy. But now, like what you were saying, when people are going to be living until 100, 105 years, being a student at 18 years, that's the first 20% of your life. Most likely, you will have to go back to the university, not as a refreshment, not as a volunteer, but as an actual student one more time. Life expectancy in the 19th century was 40 years old. That people didn't live more than 40 years old. In 1950, that increased in countries like North Europe to 70 years old, but it was still in Africa and Mali, 26 years old. But right now, the gap is closing, and more people are not satisfied of what they learned when they were in their 20s, or maybe they did not even learn because they didn't take it seriously. So I think that between us as professors, as academicians, we need to start seeing that the university of the future is going to have students who are much more variant. It's going to be a spectrum. There will be 40s and 50s and 60s trying to get an undergraduate degree, and there is nothing wrong with that. In our Eastern cultures, this is still very strange. And that's part of the social responsibility.
Yeah, it's true, because I mean, definitely it's important to define student, I mean, as a term, but also lecturer, and all these concepts that we are dealing with now. And I also remember something, because the expectations is something that we have to be multitask humans in the future. So we have to, I mean, one profession will not be enough. Then there may be some other people who may really need some more skills or education for living a normal daily life as well. So we have to change the, I mean, at least we have to think about what do we mean by saying students, lecturers, you know, universities, as all these things.
We have another question from Dr. Anke.
I have two questions. So one is, do your programs in social responsibility, are they largely accepted by students? Mm-hmm. And the second question is, because that's my personal opinion, that a task always becomes very tangible when students know why they're doing something. And therefore my second question is, are you also working with industries which have social corporate responsibility departments?
Thank you very much. I can say that while we're talking about students as community in Turkey, we are talking about different types of students. So I cannot just say that, you know, all the students in Turkey really accepted this idea, because there are lots of students even maybe never heard of that kind of idea before. So since we are living in Istanbul, we know all the universities in Istanbul. I can say that yes, even they came, generally they come to us and ask us to have some social responsibility projects. Even they didn't ask you, they are doing it. So they never ask, and they are doing it, and they bring it to you. So this is a tricky issue, because the problem is everything is so much interrelated with each other. Because if we are talking about social responsibility projects, many students have so many lectures, right? If you don't give any credit to social, social responsibility duty or whatever it is, then they say that, okay, I have to pass. That's why I have 10 lectures, I have to pass. So I cannot really, even if I really like to share some of my time, I cannot, because we are living in Istanbul. It's not easy to go from one place to another. It takes 2 hours to come, 2 hours to go. So, these are really physical conditions that somehow affect the reality, implementation reality. So, workload is something really maybe bothers them in this sense. Secondly, if you are not add these type of activities into curriculum and give some credits, then for the students, they need to know why they are doing this, right? Voluntary at some point. You just try to integrate students in this sense. But at least I can say that most of the students now in Turkey have the awareness and consciousness of doing social responsibility projects or being a part of it, because it is also the development of the CV. Because if they are working as internationally or just continue their work abroad, even in Turkey, now many companies are asking whether they have social responsibility projects or not. So this is something so much interrelated with each other. I can say that they have the conscience and awareness, but for the implementation, there are some other conditions that may hinder them from doing it. Secondly, for the industry-university cooperation, this is one of the main, let's say, one of the other strategic goals of most of the universities, having that kind of industry-university relations, because otherwise you cannot implement this new type of, education. They have to have field works, they have to study in the business sector, in all these industries. So some of the universities has at least one term to go and work outside as their credits, for example. So this is an industry-university relations, and they are doing together as well. Not only the, companies, but also some NGOs, they are just working. Most of the universities or municipalities, they come together and try to make some social responsibility projects. For tangible, you are talking about tangible something I couldn't hear.
When it becomes a reality, for example, when you work together with a newspaper, they have a social responsibility project on sustainability. Where do I buy my paper, for example? And then it becomes a reality which students can take back to the university and to this university environment. That's what I understand.
As I said, it depends. From where you are just looking the situation. It is tangible in some cases, not tangible in some other cases, but at least they're just trying to create that atmosphere that, these things are important things. You have to be a societal personalities, that kind of thing. So this is important, and most of the, for example, universities just publish this in their websites. If there is any social responsibility projects, they attract not only their own students, but some other students from all other universities, even not, for example, these universities should not be from Istanbul only. So there are some other, and this is also important. There is not only different types of educational systems, maybe system may change, but quality differences among the qualities of different countries, but we can also talk about any country and then the regional differences in qualities, etc. So I think one of the social responsibilities of, for example, the universities in Istanbul is also just do some important projects with the universities outside Istanbul, Ankara, Izmir, you know, that kind of, because we have universities all over Turkey, and if we can just have some common social responsibility projects, it will be generally very helpful for them as well.
Şahin Gök, Istanbul Gelişim University. One thing, and social responsibility requires spending money. And you say we need some more money to create great ideas. What do I understand? Do you mean that you spend more money on social responsibilities and it will come back later? Or how can we understand the spending money and receiving money, because everything depends on money to create these social responsibility activities? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm talking about some social responsibilities really that needs funding, right? I mean, you have to fund these social responsibilities projects. But I am talking about funding not to get them back at the end, but I am talking about funding that creates something concrete at the end. So that's because, you know, spending money, you can get something, it couldn't be money, but something else. That's why I'm talking about all these things, because, you know, I know that just thinking to do social responsibility projects as a good idea started and just leave it just in between, that there is no funding at all. So that's why I'm talking about a well-designed plan to apply social, because social responsibility projects has also responsibility inside, right? You are responsible to do something. If you promise, you are responsible. So funding should not be a problem within this perspective. That's why I'm talking about funding, not to get at the end, to get funding, I mean, to get this funding in cash, but to really see the concrete results.
Thank you very much for putting this program together, for the opportunity to learn from this wonderful initiative. I think my question will go directly to the founder. Okay. If we see in the academic sector, I think when we look at the trend over the years, it seems there's always been a gap between the so-called good schools, and that's why we have the Ivy schools, okay? And those schools that are not too good. And this has been the trend, okay? So even now, I think we still have this trend. We still have the schools or the universities that are so much ranked or well ranked, and we have others that are not there on the map. For instance, we have the Harvard, the MIT, and we have some of these schools in the very rural areas. Okay. Now, with SUF, with Smart University Foundation, do we think that we are trying to close this gap? And if we do, what do we think, or what are the plans, especially for SUF, to bring this type of awareness, especially to the grassroots universities or higher institutions? That's my question.
If I can answer this question, I think I will just win the Nobel Prize or something, right? Okay, I'll tell a few things. This is another debate, I think, concerning the old, quote-unquote, old-fashioned universities and smart universities or digital universities or digital campuses, because, as you said, this less advantageous universities try to catch the gap by creating new incentives, by creating new tools, because they cannot live 100 more years just to catch, right? So this is something tricky, because this is another discussion that we are involved in for some time. I mean, there is no way any university to wait 100 more years to catch Harvard or, MIT, but try to create a differentiation by creating some update tools, processes, and there are some discussions as well that now this dichotomy really creates something that less advantageous universities will be much more acceptable than the other ones, because you may really educated in a very well-known but outdated university, and you go outside and do nothing, cannot do anything, implement anything, cannot update yourself. From theoretical part of the question, you are fine. Everything is fine. You are educated in a different style. But if you go to the place to work, then you are outdated, because you cannot just use all the materials. You cannot use, machines, whatever it is. So this is another thing that we are still discussing, and I think this will be discussed for such a long period from then on, and it will be one of the most tricky questions that we have to answer. It's not related directly with Smart University Foundation, but in general, this is another anxiety or discussion or dichotomy which is created between the universities. So you have to choose one of the way.
Okay, this is all
But
for
this
now.
is a very nice question. This is very important, as you said.
Yeah. This is all for now. Thank you, Professor Esra. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.